I still don't know what my dad was thinking when he called it a bonding trip. To me, it was punishment. My name is Ethan Cole, and if there is one thing I've never been built for, it's sleeping in the middle of nowhere on a hard ground while bugs treat my face like a buffet. But every summer, my dad insisted we go disconnect from the world. No phones, no internet, just trees, firewood, and uncomfortable silence. This year was different, though. I finally convinced him to let me bring someone along. That someone was my friend Marcus. Marcus was the exact opposite of me. He actually liked camping. Knots, tents, survival tricks, all of it. He even made fun of me for struggling to start a fire once. But he also didn't judge me, which is why I chose him. I figured if I had to suffer, at least I'd have someone to make it bearable. What we didn't know was that the trip was already going wrong before we even arrived. My dad's friend had booked the wrong location, and instead of a quiet forest deep in the wilderness, we ended up at something that barely qualified as nature. It looked like someone tried to build a campground inside a tourist park. There were paved walkways, clean bathrooms, picnic tables that looked brand new, and even electrical hookups for RVs. It felt wrong immediately, like camping for people who were afraid of camping. But the worst part wasn't the campsite. It was what sat right next to it, an amusement park. Not a small one either. Real roller coasters, a Ferris wheel glowing in the distance, arcade lights flickering even during the day. It felt like two completely different worlds had collided in the worst possible way. My dad hated it instantly. Marcus thought it was hilarious. I just thought it was loud. That night, after the tents were set up, the adults sat around complaining while Marcus and I wandered off. The amusement park was still open late, and from our campsite, we could hear faint music and the distant screams of riders. Marcus had that look in his eye, the same one he got when he was about to suggest something stupid. "We should explore it," he said. I laughed at first. "We'll get kicked out." He shrugged. "Not if we're careful." That was enough for me. We waited until past midnight. The campsite was quiet, everyone asleep or drunk enough not to notice. We grabbed flashlights and slipped out toward the fence separating the campground from the amusement park. It was surprisingly easy to climb. Inside, everything changed. The lights were dimmer than they looked from outside. Some rides were still moving slowly, creaking in the wind like they were half alive. Security guards patrolled in slow loops on small golf carts, their headlights sweeping across empty walkways. We stayed low, moving between shadows. At first, it felt like a game, like we were sneaking through a giant playground we weren't supposed to be in. But the deeper we went, the quieter Marcus got. We reached the roller coaster after what felt like forever. It towered over everything, its metal tracks disappearing into darkness. Marcus pointed at the maintenance stairs. "Top view," he whispered. I should have said no. Instead, I followed him. The climb was worse than I expected. Metal steps rattled under our weight. No railings in some sections, just open air and darkness beneath us. The higher we went, the colder it got. When we finally reached the top, the entire park stretched below us like a sleeping machine. We didn't stay long. Something about being that high up made everything feel exposed. We were on our way back down when Marcus suddenly stopped. "Did you see that?" he whispered. At first, I didn't. Then I did. Between two buildings near the snack stalls, something moved. Not an animal, a person. Crouched low like they were hiding from the guards just like we were. We froze immediately. The guards were still patrolling nearby, so we couldn't move or speak. I squinted harder, trying to make sense of the shape. Then it shifted and stepped into the light. It was a man. He looked wrong instantly. His clothes were torn, hanging off his frame like he had been through something violent. But what made my stomach drop wasn't his appearance. It was his face. There was something dark smeared across it. Not dirt, not paint. Marcus grabbed my arm so hard it hurt. The man looked directly at us. Even from that distance, I felt it, like he knew exactly where we were. Then he moved. Fast. Too fast. He darted across the open space, slipping in and out of shadows, disappearing behind structures before we could react. One of the guard's parts passed nearby, its light sweeping through the area. When it was gone, so was he. We didn't speak after that. We climbed down in silence, every sound behind us feeling like it might be him following. When we finally made it back to the campsite fence, we didn't joke anymore. We didn't laugh about getting away with it. We just got back inside the tent and stayed awake. Marcus stared at the ceiling for a long time before finally saying, "That wasn't normal." I didn't answer, because I knew he was right. And deep down, I also knew something worse. We hadn't just seen someone sneaking around. We had seen someone who didn't care if they were seen. And that's when I realized the night wasn't over. Not even close. We didn't sleep that night. Or at least, I didn't. Every small sound outside the tent felt louder than it should have been. A branch snapping somewhere in the dark, a distant gate creaking. Even the wind through the trees sounded different after what we saw. Marcus tried to convince himself it was just some homeless guy sneaking around the amusement park. He said it like repeating it enough would make it true, but neither of us believed it. By morning, the whole campground felt normal again. People were cooking breakfast, laughing, packing fishing gear, acting like nothing had happened. That almost made it worse, like we were the only two people who had seen something that didn't belong there. Around mid-morning, a staff member arrived with a loudspeaker. He told everyone to gather near the main office. At first, I thought it was going to be some boring safety reminder, maybe a weather warning. But the tone in his voice was different. He kept glancing around like he didn't want to be there either. Then he said it. There had been a murder. A man had been killed near a lake about a few miles from the campground during the night. The suspect was still at large. Police were searching the entire area and everyone was being advised to pack up and leave immediately. He described the suspect briefly. Late 30s, white male, tall, disheveled appearance, possible injuries, possibly covered in blood. Marcus didn't say anything at first. Neither did I, but I felt it immediately in my stomach, like something cold dropping into place. That was him, the man from the amusement park. Everything about him matched too perfectly. The torn clothes, the unsettling way he moved, the dark stains on his face. Marcus finally whispered, "No way." But his voice wasn't confident. It was shaky. We didn't tell anyone what we saw. Not my dad, not the staff, not the police when they arrived later to take statements. I don't even know why. Maybe it was fear. Maybe it was disbelief. Or maybe some part of us didn't want to admit how close we had been to someone like that. The campground emptied faster than I expected. Within hours, the energy changed completely. The amusement park next door was shut down. Rides stood still, lights turned off. The whole place looked abandoned, like it had been erased overnight. Before leaving, I looked back one last time. From a distance, the roller coaster we climbed the night before looked different in daylight. Less exciting, more like a skeleton. Marcus was already packing the tent when he said something that stuck with me. If he saw us, why didn't he follow us? I didn't have an answer. We drove home in silence. Even my dad noticed something was off, but I didn't explain it properly. I just said we stayed up too late and saw someone weird near the park. He assumed it was some drunk tourist or prankster and left it at that. But I couldn't leave it at that. Neither could Marcus. Over the next few days, we kept going over everything we remembered, every angle, every sound, every movement. The more we talked about it, the less it made sense. Because if that man was really a fugitive, why was he out in the open like that? Why risk being seen in a place full of people? And why did it feel like he wasn't hiding from the guards, but from something else? A week later, I started noticing small things. At night, I'd hear noises outside my window. Nothing dramatic, just faint movement, like someone walking slowly through grass. At first, I told myself it was animals. Then, I started noticing something worse. Sometimes when I turned off the lights, I'd see a shape near the edge of my yard. Just for a second, standing still, not moving. And every time I looked directly at it, it was gone. Marcus admitted he was having the same problem. He kept waking up at night thinking he heard footsteps outside his house. At first, I joked about it, tried to brush it off. But the truth is, I stopped sleeping properly after that trip. There was one night I'll never forget. I was lying in bed when I heard something outside again. This time, it wasn't faint. It was closer, right under my window. I sat up slowly, heart already racing. The room was dark, but I could hear it clearly now. A soft shifting sound, like something adjusting its position. Then, silence. I didn't move, didn't breathe. After a few seconds, I slowly got out of bed and walked toward the window. I told myself not to look, but I did anyway. There was nothing there, just the empty yard and the faint glow of streetlights in the distance. Still, I didn't go back to bed right away, because even though I couldn't see anything, I had this feeling I wasn't alone, and I've had that same feeling ever since. Marcus and I don't talk about that night much anymore. When we do, it's short conversations, avoiding details, changing the subject quickly. But sometimes, when we accidentally bring it up at the same time, there's this pause between us, like we're both remembering something we can't fully explain. I don't know what we saw that night in the amusement park. I don't know what happened to that man after the police search. And I don't know why I still feel like when and now, someone is standing just out of sight, watching without making a sound. But I do know this. We didn't leave that place the same way we arrived. And whatever was in those woods or that park, I don't think it stayed there. I still don't really know how to explain what I saw, because every normal explanation I've tried feels wrong the moment I say it out loud. My name is Evan Carter, and I live in a quiet suburban stretch on the edge of Ridgevale. It's one of those places where the houses slowly thin out until they give way to trees, dirt paths, and stretches of land people don't really talk about. Behind my neighborhood, there's a wooded corridor that runs for miles. It connects to an old service road, and beyond that is something locals always called the reservoir. Except it's not really like any reservoir I've ever seen on a map. It's fenced off completely. Tall metal fencing, warning signs, and no trespassing notices that look official enough to make you think twice. But what always bothered me is that it barely exists online. No clear name, no public information, just a blank space where something large clearly is. Growing up, it was just background mystery, until I started running. I'm on my school's cross-country team, and most of my training happens outside those woods. There's a loop I use almost daily now. It starts from my street, cuts through the tree line, follows the edge of the service road, and runs parallel to the fence surrounding the reservoir before looping back. It's about 2 miles. Quiet, isolated, perfect for clearing your head. At least, that's what I used to think. The first time something felt off, I was finishing a late evening run. The sun had already dropped, and the woods were doing that thing where every sound feels louder than it should. I remember hearing rustling behind me, just off the trail. Not branches moving in the wind. Something pacing. I stopped, turned around, and saw nothing. I told myself it was an animal, deer maybe, or a fox. But the sound didn't feel random. It felt like it was matching me. I picked up my pace and finished the run faster than usual. That night, I didn't think much of it, not until I was lying in bed later trying to sleep with my window open. There was a storm rolling in. At first, it was just rain. Heavy, steady, almost calming, the kind of rain that makes everything outside feel distant. I was drifting off when I heard something that didn't belong. A voice. Soft, fragile, almost swallowed by the rain. It sounded like someone crying. I sat up immediately. At first, I thought it had to be something carried by wind or distance. But then it came again, clearer this time, right outside my house. A woman's voice. "Can you help me?" My whole body went cold. I stayed still, listening. The rain kept falling, but the voice didn't stop. "I'm cold." That was enough. I got up so fast I almost knocked my chair over. My instincts didn't even give me time to think. I ran out of my room, through the hallway, and out the front door without even grabbing my phone. The rain hit me instantly, sharp and freezing. I rounded the side of the house toward my window where the sound had been coming from. And that's when I saw her. She was crouched directly under my window, pressed against the house like she was trying to stay dry under the smallest possible overhang. A woman, dressed in something pale, almost white, like a nightgown or thin dress. Her hair was soaked, hanging over her face. I called out, asking if she was okay. She didn't answer. Instead, she slowly lifted her head. And then everything changed. She moved suddenly, faster than I expected, rushing toward me like she was going to collide with me. I froze, unsure whether to step back or help. But right before she reached me, she stopped, just for a fraction of a second, like she had noticed something. Then she turned sharply and ran, straight into the trees behind my house. Not stumbling, not hesitating, just gone. I stood there in the rain, completely soaked, trying to understand what had just happened. By the time I went back inside, my dad was already awake. We checked every door and window, locked everything. He suggested calling the police, but by the time we debated it, the rain had gotten worse and the woods behind our house were already pitch black. We decided to wait. The next morning, everything looked normal again. Too normal. I convinced myself I had misheard things, that maybe someone had gotten lost, or maybe it was just a strange coincidence during a storm. My dad said the same thing. Probably someone unstable, probably harmless, but neither of us sounded convinced. A few days passed. Then, things got worse. I went for a run again, this time in the afternoon. The weather was clear, the sky bright, everything feeling almost too peaceful after what happened. I reached the part of the route that runs along the reservoir fence, and that's when I saw her again. At first, I didn't believe it, but there she was, sitting at the edge of the water on the other side of the fence, feet just barely touching the surface. The exact same woman. I stopped running completely. The fence between us was tall, reinforced, topped with barbed wire. There was no obvious way in. I had checked that route dozens of times before. And yet she was there like it meant nothing. As soon as I stopped, she turned her head, looked directly at me. Even from that distance, I recognized her, and she recognized me. The moment locked in my chest like something tightening. Then she stood up and started running toward the fence. Fast, too fast. I backed up instinctively, already reaching for my phone, but before I could react further, she stopped right at the fence line and smiled. Not a friendly smile, not a confused one, something deliberate, like she was waiting for me to understand something I didn't want to understand. I told her I was calling the police. The second I said it, her expression changed. She turned away instantly and disappeared into the water. Just stepped in and kept going until she was gone beneath the surface. No splash that matched her movement, no hesitation. Just gone. I called the police anyway. They arrived later, checked the area, asked questions, wrote things down. But by the time they searched, there was nothing. No footprints near the fence, no sign anyone had been there at all. They told me it was probably a mentally unstable person wandering the area, but I couldn't shake it, because she wasn't just wandering, she was waiting. And after that day, things didn't stop. They got closer. At night, I started hearing movement outside my window again. Not crying this time, just footsteps, slow, controlled, like someone pacing back and forth just out of sight. And the worst part was the feeling that sometimes it stopped when I moved closer to the window, like it knew I was listening, like it knew exactly where I was. Last night, I heard it again, right outside my house, and this time it didn't stop when I turned on the light. It just stayed there, waiting. And I still don't know if I should open the curtain or pretend I didn't hear anything, but something tells me it already knows I'm awake. By the time I left that shift early, I already knew I was done with that job. I didn't need a formal resignation or a goodbye. Something about the way Esteban looked at me that day made it clear there were no clean exits from whatever I had stepped into. I drove home with my windows up, checking my rearview mirror every few seconds. Every white van felt like it was following me. Every car slowing down behind me made my stomach tighten. It was irrational, maybe, but it didn't feel irrational in the moment. It felt like survival. For the first few days after quitting, nothing happened. No calls, no messages, no strange visits. That silence was almost worse than confrontation. I kept expecting something to break it. Then came the envelope. It was tucked under my apartment door one night when I got back from a quick store run. No stamp, no name, just my apartment number written in neat, printed letters. Inside was a single photo. It was me, standing at the lifeguard chair. But what made my chest go cold wasn't the photo itself. It was what was behind me in it. The pool house door, slightly open, and inside that dark gap, barely visible, was what looked like rows of shelves. Not towels, not equipment, just sealed crates stocked too neatly to be anything normal. On the back of the photo was a short message. "You saw more than you were paid to see." I didn't sleep that night. The next morning, I went back to the hotel parking lot. I told myself it was to confirm I wasn't losing my mind. The pool area was still running like normal, guests laughing, kids splashing, everything exactly like before. But I didn't go in. I just sat in my car across the street and watched. Around 20 minutes later, I saw him, Esteban. He stepped out from a side entrance I had never noticed before. He wasn't wearing sunglasses this time. He looked directly across the street, at me. Even from that distance, I could feel it. Not anger, not surprise, expectation, like he knew I would come back. I left immediately. After that, things started getting strange at home. At first, it was small. My trash bag moved slightly when I hadn't touched it. My door lock felt loose, even though I had just replaced it. Then I started hearing sounds at night, not outside like before, but inside the building. Footsteps in the hallway when I was alone. One night, I woke up to my TV turned on, static, loud, blinding. And sitting on the coffee table in front of it was a blue wristband, the same kind they used at the pool. That was the breaking point. I didn't wait anymore. I packed a bag and stayed at my cousin's place for a while. I didn't explain everything, just said I had a weird situation at work. He thought I was overreacting. I almost believed him. Almost. 2 weeks later, the police showed up at my old apartment. I only found out because my landlord called me. They asked about possible financial irregularities linked to a former employer. That's all they said. No names. But I already knew what it meant. The hotel was under investigation. After that, things finally went quiet for real. No more photos, no more signs, no more wristbands appearing where they shouldn't. But I still think about something I never understood. Why me? I was just a lifeguard. I didn't do anything special. I didn't know anything important. I wasn't even good at asking questions. So why involve me at all? Months later, I ran into someone who used to work maintenance at the hotel. We only talked for a minute, but what he said stuck with me. He told me, they don't hire people for the job. They hire people for what they might see. I didn't ask him what he meant. I didn't need to, because I already knew. That job wasn't about watching a pool. It was about watching the people who came through that door and deciding who noticed too much. And the worst part? I think I did. I still remember the exact sound of the train doors opening, that mechanical hiss followed by a rush of cold air from the tunnel. It should have been ordinary. I'd taken that same line home for years without thinking twice. But what happened that afternoon changed the way I look at every empty station, every shadow between the tracks. It was late October, 2016, the kind of gray day where the sky looks unfinished, like it couldn't decide whether to rain or just give up completely. I had just finished school and was heading home alone, like usual. My headphones were in, volume way too high, phone in my hand, scrolling through nothing in particular. I wasn't paying attention to anything around me. That was my first mistake. The train was quiet, almost too quiet. Only a handful of people scattered across the seats, each lost in their own world. I remember leaning against the window, watching the tunnels blur by, thinking about nothing important at all. We pulled into my stop, 96th Street. The doors slid open. That's when everything changed. There was someone standing directly in front of me. At first, my brain didn't process what I was seeing. It was like a delay, like my mind refused to accept it. A figure standing right in the doorway, blocking my exit. Bright colors, overly exaggerated features. A clown. Not the kind you see in birthday parties or circus posters. This was wrong. The makeup wasn't clean. The white face paint looked uneven, almost smeared, like it had been applied in a hurry or worn too long. The red around the mouth was darker than it should have been. The smile wasn't friendly. It looked fixed. He didn't move. He just stared. I should have stepped back immediately, but I didn't. I think I was frozen between confusion and disbelief. The doors were still open. The train hadn't left yet. People behind me were starting to shift, annoyed, waiting for me to move. I tried to sidestep him. That's when he leaned in. Fast. Too fast. His head tilted slightly, like he was trying to look directly into me, like he wanted to make sure I understood something. I felt my body react before my brain did. I pushed forward, brushing past him. That's when everything snapped. He grabbed for me. I don't know if he was trying to hold me back or pull me in, but I felt his hand barely miss my jacket. And in that split second, something inside me shifted from confusion to pure survival. I ran. I sprinted down the platform without thinking. Behind me, I heard footsteps. Not walking, running. Heavy, uneven, almost mechanical, like something not used to moving quickly, forcing itself into motion. I glanced back once. That was enough. He was chasing me. The clown was chasing me through a nearly empty subway station. My heart was hammering so hard I could barely hear my own footsteps. I cut through the platform, heading for the stairs. My phone fell out of my hand somewhere behind me, but I didn't stop. I couldn't stop. The sound of his shoes hitting the concrete was getting closer. Up the stairs, 2 at a time, my lungs burning. I burst through the turnstile and into the street like I had been thrown out of something I didn't understand. Cold air hit me instantly. I didn't stop running until I was 2 blocks away. Only then did I turn around. Nothing. No clown. No footsteps. No sign of anyone following me. Just the normal noise of the city, like nothing had happened. I stood there for a long time, trying to convince myself I had misread the situation. Maybe it was a prank. Maybe I was overreacting. Maybe I had imagined the chase part entirely. But then I saw something that made my stomach drop. On my jacket sleeve, a faint smear of red makeup. I went home shaken, telling myself it was nothing, just a weird encounter, just someone messing around. I even laughed about it later that night when I told a friend. It sounded ridiculous when spoken out loud. A clown on the subway chasing someone with a knife. It sounded like a bad story. But a few days later, I saw something online. A news post buried deep in a local thread. Someone had reported a clown-like figure near 96th Street Station around the same time. Another post mentioned a man with a knife seen running into the tunnels, though the details were vague and quickly dismissed by authorities as unreliable witness claims. Nothing official, nothing confirmed, but it made my stomach twist in a way I couldn't ignore. I stopped taking that station for a while after that, started walking longer routes, switching trains, avoiding anything that felt even remotely similar. My friends teased me about it, said I was letting some random encounter get in my head. Maybe they were right. For a while, nothing else happened. Weeks passed. Then one evening, I got on a train later than usual. Different line, different station. I wasn't thinking about it anymore. I had almost convinced myself it was just a one-time thing. The train doors closed, and then I looked across the carriage. My breath caught. There was a man sitting there, not a clown this time, but wearing a red nose in his hand, just holding it, looking at me, waiting, and smiling. Not the same painted smile, a real one. And somehow, that was worse. I looked away immediately, telling myself it was coincidence. People carry weird things all the time, a prop, a joke, maybe something for work. I tried to lock my eyes on my phone, but I couldn't focus. I could feel him watching me without even looking up. The train kept moving. Station after station passed in that dull underground blur. I told myself to get off early, switch lines, lose him in the crowd, but every time I thought about moving, I hesitated. Not because I was calm, because something about him made me feel like reacting would make it worse. I finally looked again. He hadn't moved, still sitting there, still holding the red nose in his hand, now gently turning it between his fingers like he was waiting for a cue. And then he did something small. He tilted his head, just slightly, like he recognized me. My chest tightened. I stood up slowly, pretending I was just adjusting my seat. I moved toward the door without fully committing to it, trying to see if he would react. He did. He stood up too. Not fast, not rushed, just smooth, like he had been expecting it the whole time. That's when I stopped thinking and just moved. I pushed through the nearest door as soon as the train slowed at the next station. I didn't wait for it to fully stop. I didn't care if I got yelled at. I just got out. The platform was crowded, loud, normal. People talking, phones ringing, footsteps everywhere. I forced myself into the crowd, blending in, walking fast without running. I didn't look back, not even once. I took 2 more train changes after that. I stayed in busy stations, kept moving until I felt like I had gone far enough that it couldn't possibly matter anymore. By the time I got home, I was exhausted, mentally drained, and angry at myself for letting paranoia take over again. I told myself I was done thinking about it. That lasted about 3 days. On the 4th night, I woke up at 3:12 a.m. Not because of noise, because of silence. There was something wrong with it. My apartment was never that quiet. Even at night, there was traffic, distant sirens, the usual city background. That night, there was nothing. I got up slowly, checked the hallway, nothing. Checked the kitchen, nothing. Then I noticed my front door. It was unlocked. I always locked it, always. My hand moved before my brain caught up. I locked it, double-checked it, then stood there for a moment trying to convince myself I had simply forgotten, stress, tiredness, nothing more. That's when I saw it. On the floor, near the door. A single red nose. Not plastic packaging, not a toy set, just the nose, sitting there like it had always belonged. I didn't sleep after that. The next morning, I went straight to the police. I didn't have much to show them, just a vague story, a strange encounter, and something left at my door that could easily be dismissed as a prank. They listened politely, wrote things down, and told me they'd keep an eye on the area. That was it. Nothing more. For a while after that, things went quiet again. Too quiet. I started checking behind me more often, avoiding late trains, changing routes without thinking. My friends stopped joking about it when they noticed I wasn't laughing anymore. Then, about a month later, it happened again. I was walking home just before sunset this time, not even late, normal time. Busy street, people everywhere. I remember feeling almost relaxed, like maybe I had finally moved past it. Then I saw him, across the street, standing still. The same figure. No makeup this time, no costume, just the same man from the train, holding something red in his hand. He didn't cross, didn't wave, didn't move at all, just watched. And then he lifted his hand slightly. The red nose. The same one. My body reacted before my mind did. I turned and walked fast into the nearest crowd, weaving through people, not looking back until I was inside a store with glass windows. When I finally looked out again, he was gone. No sign of him anywhere. I don't know who he was. I don't know why it started or what he wanted. I wish I could say it was random or a series of coincidences or something explainable that just spiraled out of control. But there's one thing I never stopped thinking about. He never once seemed surprised, Not in the station, not on the train, not outside my apartment. It always felt like he was waiting for me to notice him. And worse than that, like he already knew I would.